All right, baseball fans, we've got some administrative announcements to go over before we dive into Ducks on the Pod, episode number 7. But welcome in. First off, I just wanted to mention that we're officially moving from Tuesdays to Wednesdays. It took me a month and a half, but I've realized that recording on Monday nights makes for a very long first day of the work week. So I'm recording on Tuesday evenings now, and new episodes will be premiering every Wednesday. Please adjust your schedules accordingly. Next, we've got 2 winners from last week's trivia challenge. Both Kirk Strasser and Ben Rushley answered the question correctly and received their very own Ducks on the Pod t-shirt for their efforts. To recap, that question was, which 2 major league ballparks have that runway of dirt connecting the home plate area and the pitcher's mound? The answer, of course, Comerica Park, home of the Detroit Tigers, and Chase Field, home of the Arizona Diamondbacks. Kirk and Ben, thanks for playing. I hope you'll wear your shirts proudly and share your success story with anyone who might ask you what the hell you're wearing. And now that you've got the gear, I need to ask for your help. See, my goal is to have a picture of a Ducks on the Pod t-shirt taken at as many ballparks as possible. Major, minor, little league, doesn't matter. I just want to see these bad boys out in the baseball world. So take a pic, put it on social, tag the show, and I'll figure out a reward of some kind. Maybe even a guest appearance on a future episode. Since the trivia was such a hit last week, I've got another question for you this week, and that is, who are the 4 players in baseball history to have won the Rookie of the Year and the MVP in back-to-back seasons? I'll give you a hint. It's not Ichiro, who won both in 2001. It's not Fred Lynn, who won both in 1975. It's not Johnny Bench, who was Rookie of the Year in 68 and then MVP in 1970. And it's not Jackie Robinson, who was Rookie of the Year in 1947 and MVP in 1949. And here's another hint. These 4 players that I'm looking for, they all exist in relatively recent memory. You don't really have to go that far back to find these guys. So again, let me know that answer on Facebook, Twitter, at Ducks on the Pod. Send it over to my email, gatzkemitch@gmail.com. Get a hold of me however you can so you can get your hands on one of these exclusive t-shirts. And also last week, I talked about how my college roommate Nate was able to stump me with his question about which pitcher would get credit for a win in a situation where a guy finishes an inning, then gets pinch hit for, and his team takes the lead later in that inning. That was a doozy, and apparently people like hearing me struggle and admit I don't know things because I got a bunch of brain teasers sent to me in the past week. We won't be getting into any of those this week, but I did want to mention that we will be coming back to these stumpers throughout the season. Please keep sending those my way as well. Wacky rule questions. Honestly, send us anything you've never fully understood about baseball, and we'll dig into it and get to the bottom of it for you. And the last thing I want to mention before we actually start the show, I feel obligated to mention the accomplishment of this guy, Trey Mancini, who has tied the Major League rookie home run record, hitting 7 bombs in his first 12 career games. He is just the 3rd player dating back to 1913 to go deep 7 times in his first 12 career big league games. He joins Trevor Story and Dino Restelli in 1949. Story obviously did it last year. We were all blown away. I could not believe Trevor Story continued to hit home runs at the pace that he did. He came out guns blazing in the opening week. And actually, I was working one day, and my boss had just had his fantasy draft. And he said, "Hey, Mitch, I grabbed this guy Trevor Story because he's already got 4 homers, and they'd only played, I think, 4 games or whatever it was. So I'm going about my work day, and eventually my boss comes over and says, "Hey, Story just hit another homer in his first at-bat." So it's beginner's luck. Comes up to me about an hour later. Story homered again. I mean, what he did was just unbelievable. And then come to find out that later in the year, Trey Mancini would start a streak of his own and pick it up this year. He was called up for a cup of coffee in September, hit some homers, actually made the team out of spring training this year, which was a bit of a surprise. And now Trey Mancini finds himself tied with a chance to eclipse the record for most home runs in the shortest amount of time to start your career. It's been awesome to watch. Wish him nothing but the best. Buck Showalter actually has his hands full now trying to figure out a lineup spot for him, something to keep your eye on. But those are all the announcements I have, and now we can check this week's starting lineup. Leading off this week, I've got major beef with the way Bruce Bochy has been filling out the San Francisco Giants starting lineups, and I'll tell you why. In the all-important second spot, I'm going to tell you why you should stop letting your geography determine your fandom. And we've got a very cool story from a man who wrote all 30 Major League Baseball organizations, asking them why his son should be a fan of their team. Just a cool story to go alongside with this topic. Batting third, I'll tell you another reason why this New York Yankees team is unlike any other that we've ever seen. And cleaning up this week, John Heyman put out a piece on FanRag last week listing 50 current players he thinks fans should admire and follow. I've whittled that list down to 10, 5 guys from each league, and I'll give you a little reason why you should be following and admiring what each of those players is doing. And now it's my favorite part of the show when we welcome in our good friend Hamilton Porter to tell us what to do next. All right, baseball fans, so I've got a bone to pick with one manager who I think is top 5 in the league. It's pretty easy to say that. But for some reason, Bruce Bochy insists on Denard Span leading off and Eduardo Nunez batting lower in the lineup, normally in the 6th spot. Now, first of all, Span should not be leading off anymore. Let's start with that. He doesn't get on base enough. As of Monday, his on-base percentage is 20 points lower than Nunez's batting average. And we're getting to the point in the season where small sample size can't really be used as a scapegoat anymore. And even when Span does get on, he's not speedy enough to make a real difference the way he used to. He's 1 for 6 in stolen base attempts going back to last August and including the postseason. He only attempted 19 steals in 143 games in 2016. And on a team like the Giants that normally just goes station to station, you need somebody that's going to get on base and kind of mix it up. Nunez has reached base in 10 of the 13 games played so far this season, and he's got 5 steals already. And sure, I'm bringing this up for selfish reasons. Nunez is on my fantasy team, and he holds a hell of a lot more fantasy value leading off than he does trapped in the middle of the order. But this issue here has real-life implications as well. You need to look no further than the box score from the Giants game against the D-backs last Tuesday, April 11. Span, Buster Posey, and Brandon Crawford all did not start that day. So Bruce Bochy makes out a lineup with Gorkys Hernandez leading off, Aaron Hill cleaning up, and Nick Hundley batting 5th. No disrespect to Hernandez, but he's a 29-year-old with 264 career Major League plate appearances. He's got a 190 average and a 255 on-base percentage in the bigs. He's simply not a leadoff hitter. Now, Hill and Hundley have some pop left in their bats, but they're certainly not the high-contact types that you want occupying your main RBI spots in the lineup. And to his credit, Hundley actually had himself a nice day, going 3 for 5 with an RBI and 2 runs scored. But Hernandez and Hill went a combined 0 for 9 with 1 walk, 3 Ks, and 11 runners left on base. So when you see Nunez's 4 for 5 day produce just 1 RBI and no runs scored, you can't help but feel it was a little bit wasted since he was buried in that 6th spot of the lineup. Had Nunez been leading off, hell, even cleaning up, chances are he ends up accounting for more than just the 1 run. And in a game that ended 4-3 in favor of the D-backs, who knows? Maybe having Nunez hit higher in the lineup would have been enough of a difference for the Giants to actually win that game. Unfortunately, we'll never know because Bruce Bochy continues to either be too lazy or too hard-headed to alter his lineup, despite continued evidence suggesting that he should.
We're talking about unchecked aggression here.
So I came across this very cool story about a man named Pete Van Vliet. First of all, great name. But this guy wrote a letter to all 30 Major League Baseball organizations asking them why his young son should be a fan of their team. And this is a fantastic idea. And he's actually gotten some responses from some teams on this. Really, though, this is just a lesson for us all. That you don't have to feel boxed in when choosing your favorite sports teams. Newsflash, just because you live in or near a city with a hometown team doesn't mean you're obligated to root for them. A close friend of mine, Chase Spangler, is from the Dayton, Ohio area, but he's a huge Red Sox fan. Mostly because his dad rooted for them, but also because of great players like Nomar Garcia-Parra and Mo Vaughn, if you consider him a great player. But these guys played for Boston when he was first coming into his sports consciousness, and so he gravitated to that team. Now, after originally teasing him about only becoming a fan once the Bo Sox reversed the curse in 2004, I've come to respect and admire Chase for his decision to follow a team that's nowhere near his backyard. And he's setting a good example for all of us, because when he first started this, it would have been tough. You would have had to wait for the nationally televised games. MLB.TV wasn't really a thing until the last few years here. Sure, it's been going on for 15 years, but it hasn't really become a popular tool for a lot of fans to enjoy until the last few years here. We're now in an age of social media where you can constantly be in contact and stay connected to all of your favorite teams, regardless of where they are. You don't have to strictly follow the hometown team because that's the team that's getting the most coverage in your area. You can find that coverage for any team in a number of places. And Chase's unorthodox fandom has actually led to one of my favorite summer traditions, actually. Every year for the past 4 years now, Chase has come up to Detroit whenever the Sox are in town to play the Tigers, and we make a weekend out of it. This year, it actually happened early with the first homestand, the first home series, actually, in Detroit, being against the Red Sox. Normally, we have to wait until late in the summer, but either way, it's just a great time, and that wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for Chase's outside-the-box thinking when it came to choosing his favorite team. So let Pete Van Vliet and Chase Spangler be a lesson. You do not have to root for the team that's in your backyard just because they're there. You can look for other teams, and don't let people get mad at you about it. Don't let people tease you about it. I get made fun of all the time for jumping on bandwagons. You know, it seems every year I have a new team that I like. What's wrong with that? Of course, I'm always going to like the Tigers because I have for my whole young adult life. But when it comes down to it, I root for players. And if a team's got a lot of good players that I like, I'm going to end up rooting for the team. I'm sorry. If there's a cool story that I like following, I'm going to end up rooting for the team. I'm not sorry, actually. I said I'm sorry. I take it back. You don't have to feel sorry. You can root for any team that you damn well please, and you don't have to let anybody else tell you otherwise. So please, stop letting your geography determine your fandom. All right, baseball fans. So I'm watching ESPN's Sunday Night Baseball last weekend, and Jessica Mendoza, who I love, by the way, makes a fantastic point. She basically says the Yankees veterans don't have the same kind of spotlight on them as they have in years past because there's all of a sudden such a focus on this team's youth and the rebuild that's going on. For the first time in my memory, at least, it's not all about making it to the World Series and winning the World Series in New York. It's about getting this team ready to make a run at multiple World Series down the line. That has to have taken so much of the pressure off not only the young guys, but the veterans too. We always talk about New York as such a tough place to play, especially if you're wearing the pinstripes playing for the Yankees. But we haven't really heard that this season because of this new focus on the future. One of the newest Yankees, Matt Holliday, hasn't had to read headlines about him coming to town and being the anchor of the offense all of a sudden. Chase Headley hasn't had to hear about possibly losing his job because there's not much of a sense of urgency surrounding the team this year. Jacoby Ellsbury and Brett Gardner can just be themselves. And fun fact, those three, Headley, Ellsbury, and Gardner, actually have New York tied with Seattle for the most stolen bases in the American League with 12. Maybe we underestimated this team's group of proven players because we're so anxious for the kids to blossom into those stars that we think they're going to be. We seem to have forgotten that this was already a good team on the verge of making the postseason last year, and they made some good moves in the offseason to get even better, besides bringing up all the kids. I'll tell you what, the key throughout this summer, and I'll keep saying this, it's going to be Michael Pineda and Luis Severino. Masahiro Tanaka is off to a bit of a rough start, but he'll gradually get back to putting up the same consistently solid outings we're used to seeing from him. CC Sabathia has been a nice surprise early on, but he is what he is at this point, a serviceable, middle-of-the-rotation innings eater who's going to give you a decent shot at winning the ball games that he pitches. And the fifth starter is going to end up being a revolving door, as it is with many teams as the summer wears on. So really, these two guys, Pineda and Severino, hold the key for this Yankees team. If they continue to pitch well, as they have early on, then I'm not expecting the Yankees to really fall back. I mean, they've shown that they can hit even without Gary Sanchez being in the lineup for the last week. They've shown that the bullpen can hang on to leads with the last three guys in line, Clippard, Betances, and Chapman. It doesn't get much better than that. It doesn't get any better than that, if you ask me. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I hope this lack of a sense of urgency, this lack of extreme focus on how the Yankees are doing and how they can make it all the way this year, I'm hoping that helps guys like Pineda, Severino, Headley, Holiday, everybody on the team. Because as I've said, a good Yankees team is good for baseball, especially when you consider the new dynamic that they've got going on, this youth movement that they've got. Imagine if not only they can be successful this year, but they can parlay that into more success down the line as more and more of these kids come of age and are ready for the show. I've always been a Yankees hater, but I'm quickly starting to come to the dark side. I don't know, maybe I just love a team that's always been the favorite becoming the underdog. Whatever it is, it's fun to watch baseball in New York right now. They're on a tear, and I hope it continues. I came across an interesting article from John Heyman of FanRagSports.com, and he was inspired to put out a list of his 50 current Major League players to admire and follow because of this argument that apparently there aren't enough stars in the game. Nobody knows who the superstars of baseball are. The game doesn't do a good enough job of marketing these guys on a national scale. Whatever the case may be, they're out there. You just have to find them. And it's really not hard. Just watch the games. They stick out. They blow you away with talent and just the things that they can do on the baseball field. So anyway, he's got 50. For brevity's sake, I have 10 and a little reason why each of them is somebody to watch. I have them listed just in terms of who came to mind first. We're going to start in the AL. Here we go. Miguel Cabrera. This guy, for my money and a lot of people's money, is the best hitter of this generation. He kind of took that baton from Albert Pujols once Pujols hightailed it to Los Angeles, signed that mega deal with the Angels. Ever since then, he's kind of been on a bit of a decline. And that was only going to be natural. Pujols was just unreal in St. Louis. But anyway, Cabrera has now become the top hitter in the game and really one of the best hitters of all time. He's got a triple crown, first of all, which hasn't been done in decades. He can hit for average, hit for power. He's also just one of the most cerebral, one of the smartest ball players on the field. And he's always got a smile on his face. It's hard not to like Miguel Cabrera, particularly when he's been on your childhood team. I've been blessed to watch his career unfold as he came to the Tigers. I grew up watching this guy, and he'll always be my favorite player, but it really is warranted. It's not just something that I'm saying because he's one of my guys. He really is one of the top players in the game today. Number 2, Mike Trout. A lot of people would have had him number 1 because he is the best baseball player in terms of being able to do everything at such a high level. And I often say I hate on him. It's not that I don't think he's good. He's amazing. There's no denying that. But somebody has to hate on him. And Trout has kind of seen his career take off as the WAR stat has also become more and more prevalent in baseball talk. And really when it comes down to it, I just think WAR is a very flawed stat. It tries to do too much, and there's just so many variables and so many ins and outs and what have yous. It's hard to keep track of. But no matter what the numbers say, you can watch a game and see that Mike Trout is the best player on the field, no doubt about it. It's really just unfortunate that he plays for the Angels because he doesn't actually get enough love. He doesn't get the recognition that he deserves because he plays out west on a team that hasn't been successful for some years now. I hope for Trout's sake and baseball's sake in general that the Angels can at some point either move him or make a run at the playoffs so we can see the best player in the biggest games of the year. Until then, you'll just have to stay up and watch MLB.TV at 10 o'clock to tune in for Angels games to watch this guy. But that is worth it too. Number 3, a guy that's in Trout's division, Jose Altuve, second baseman for the Houston Astros. He's got to be the smallest guy in the league. He's about 5'6" and maybe 160. I mean, this guy is tiny, but he plays a tremendous second base, and he hits like he's a foot taller and 100 pounds heavier. I don't know how he's doing it, but he's doing it and doing it well. Number 4 in the AL, a guy that I hate to love, quite honestly, because he plays against my Detroit Tigers. It's Francisco Lindor, the shortstop for the Cleveland Indians. He kind of took over the spotlight in the postseason last year, just leading his team when it needed him most. And he continued that in the World Baseball Classic, and he's continued it in the early going here in the 2017 season. He's another one of those guys who just plays with a smile on his face, and it's hard not to like what he does on the field. To be so young and to be such a leader, it's very rare and it's very refreshing. A lot of times you see guys come into the league and they just try to keep their head down and, do what they can, play their role. And after a few years, they start to loosen up. Well, Lindor came in the league, and he was already one of the most charismatic guys on the field, and that's not something that you want to bottle up. And props to Terry Francona for not trying to do that and just letting Lindor be who he is, a tremendous baseball player. Number 5, the last I got in the AL, it's Mookie Betts, the outfielder for the Boston Red Sox. I don't know if it's just the name or what, but this guy is something to behold. I actually headed out to right field at Comerica Park a couple weekends ago when the Red Sox were in town, and I sat just a few rows behind Mookie, and I was screaming at him, I got 25-1 odds that says you are going to win the AL MVP. So what do you say, Mookie? How about you make me some money this year, huh? Let's head over to the senior circuit in the NL. These 5 guys are pretty easy for me. The AL I had to think about. The NL guys came much quicker to me. Starting it off with Clayton Kershaw. He's simply a freak of nature. Nobody can do what Clayton Kershaw does. Very few ever have. He really is, and this might sound hyperbolic, might sound like I'm trying to hype him up, but he doesn't need it because he really is one of the best pitchers of all time. Look at the numbers. They speak for themselves. Sure, he's had some postseason struggles, but a lot of that has to do with the team that he's on and the struggles that they have gone through in the postseason as a unit. But really, if you ask me, if I got one game to win, it's going to be Kershaw on the mound, and I don't think I really have to explain why. Number 2, a man who will be a legend in Chicago forever, Anthony Rizzo, the first baseman for the Cubs. He helped bring a World Series championship to the North Side for the first time in 108 years. But he was there when the Cubs were really bad. He was anchoring the middle of that lineup, so I'm glad to see him still there for the good times since he stuck it out for the bad times and really carried that team for a couple of years. My 3rd player in the NL, Nolan Arenado. He's very much under the radar playing in Colorado, a market that just doesn't get a whole lot of publicity from the national media. But that doesn't mean this guy doesn't deserve it. He's put up MVP caliber years playing for a team that maybe isn't that great, but he does it all. Even when you consider the fact that he plays 81 games in Coors Field, his numbers still blow you away. He can also do it with the glove. He's one of the smoothest we have at third base. And I'm hoping that this year is a bit of a coming out party for him. Not in terms of better performance. He's already there. He's already at the top in terms of performance. But I'm hoping he just gets his name out there more so more people can enjoy what it is he does, because he really is one of the best. Fourth guy in the NL, Madison Bumgarner, the man they call the Mad Bum, pitcher for the San Francisco Giants. He's got the postseason heroics. We've seen that multiple times with him just carrying San Francisco to world championships. He's actually a close second in who I want to get the ball after Clayton Kershaw if I had just one game to win. And he is the main reason I hope that the National League never institutes the designated hitter, because Bumgarner can swing it. He is a pitcher who rakes. On opening day, he actually hit 2 home runs and accounted for a majority of the San Francisco Giants' offense that day. He's one of those quieter guys who just minds his business and does what he does, but he's so good at it. You can't really be mad at him for not having much of an outgoing personality. Speaking of outgoing personalities, number 5 in the National League, the Mets' Noah Syndergaard, the pitcher with the flow. He's got those long blonde locks, and that's just the start of Syndergaard's greatness. He throws harder than just about every other starter in the league. Throws harder than most relievers, actually, averaging a fastball over 98 miles an hour. Strikes out a ton of guys, plays in New York. He's going to appear in Game of Thrones Season 7, apparently, with a little cameo. Can't wait to see that in July. And if you're looking for up-and-coming starting pitchers, the list starts with Noah Syndergaard. In fact, he might not even be up-and-coming anymore. He might already be there. So keep an eye on those 10 guys. Again, Miguel Cabrera, Mike Trout, Jose Altuve, Francisco Lindor, Mookie Betts, Clayton Kershaw, Anthony Rizzo, Nolan Arenado, Madison Bumgarner, and Noah Syndergaard. And next time you hear somebody complain about a lack of star power in baseball, please direct them to any one of these 10 guys and kindly tell that person they don't know what the hell they're talking about. That's going to do it for me and episode 7 of Ducks on the Pod. As always, thanks so much for joining me. Remember to like the Facebook page, follow us on Twitter at Ducks on the Pod. Please rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, and let's keep building this momentum. If you can believe it, we're already 1/12 of the way through the baseball season, and we're just going to keep getting stronger, so I'd love to have you along for the ride. Until next week, baseball fans, remember, keep your glove on the dirt, your bat off your shoulder, and always keep your eye on the ball.